The most beautiful telling of the Easter story is John's. John chapter 20, verses 1 through 18. In paraphrase, it goes like this. Early in the morning, while it was still dark, Mary woke up. A few sleepy seconds passed before the memory cut into her heart and jarred her awake. He was gone. Jesus was dead. The tomb! She had to get to the tomb. She threw on her clothes and off she went, quietly making her way through the streets, then a sharp turn down the road that led out of town. The black sky hung low. We don't know how long it took her to get there, or if she stumbled along the way. All we know is what she saw. The stone that sealed his grave was rolled to one side. Robbers! And that's when the panic and running begins. Mary takes off like a shot to tell the others. As the story unfolds, we get the strong sense that Peter and the beloved disciple are having trouble believing Mary's report. What do you mean he's not there? Now there are 3 racing towards the tomb, each one on a journey to encounter their own truth. By the time Mary gets back to the tomb, the other 2 disciples have already inspected the empty linen wrappings and the head wrapping rolled up and left in place by itself. They briskly rush past her on their way out of the tomb and race back down the path. Mary is left standing outside, crying. Eventually, she looks into the tomb, and that's when she sees the angels. They ask her why she is crying. She tells them Jesus has been taken and she doesn't know where. Then he is there, but she does not know him. Woman, why are you weeping? Who are you looking for? Still, she does not know him. Please tell me where he is. He calls her by name. Mary. One word, that's all it took. Mary. Her eyes fly wide open in a sudden rush of recognition. Teacher! And Jesus says, go tell the brothers, I am ascending to my Father. Mary runs back. Mary, a woman, is the first to see the risen Christ. And with joy-filled amazement, she announces, I have seen the Lord. The story of Easter morning. But what does this story mean to us? What was happening on the cross? And what happened after? Mary's Easter story gives us some clues. It's a story of relationship, and all the players in the story have a history together. In the greater narrative, we recognize that through Jesus, God is with us. In the Easter story, we find that through the mystery of the resurrection, God remains with us. Mary further helps us understand that ultimately, we are invited into the continuing story of relationship with the living Christ. Some interpret Jesus' act on the cross as an atoning sacrifice of innocent blood required by a God who demands ransom for justice. But to many, that interpretation is out of harmony with the nature of God revealed in the life and ministry of Jesus. The God revealed in Jesus is one of boundless love and grace, mercy and peace. God's action of healing love reaches out through Jesus Christ to reconcile the whole of creation to God. Not in vengeful anger, but in radical, selfless love. All through the Gospel of John, Jesus is intent on helping his disciples understand the reason for his being, the purpose of his mission, and the nature of God revealed in and through his life and ministry. When they press him on issues of who's in and who's out, when they want him to clarify where he draws the line, Jesus flatly answers, "I will draw all people to myself," which is to say, I am here for everyone. There is no line. Radical, selfless love, drawing all people close. In the dawn of resurrection morning, God speaks clearly through the presence of the living Christ about love. Easter also helps us see deeper into the patterns of Christ-like living, the pattern of whole life discipleship that Jesus, the peaceful one, modeled through his ministry. Reaching back to John chapter 12, do you remember the story of the wheat? Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Using images of wheat, Jesus speaks to the heart of suffering love. He talks about dying to self and transformation and new life. He is not talking about needless suffering. He is talking about suffering for the sake of others in acts of love that allow us to stand in solidarity with those who suffer needlessly due to poverty, racism, violence, and other forms of systemic injustice. Jesus is talking about opening ourselves to a depth of relationship with God that transforms. A relationship that allows our authentic, true self to emerge as the false self withers and falls away, birthing new life. Ours is a loving God who yearns to draw the world close in an ever-widening circle of transforming love, bringing healing, wholeness, and hope. That is the Easter story for everyone. And it looks a whole lot like metamorphosis to me. Nancy Seifer and Martin Vuig shared these words about metamorphosis. One of the most enduring metaphors for the spiritual path is the transformation of the lowly caterpillar into a butterfly. Out of its own substance, the ground-hugging grub weaves the medium for its metamorphosis, the chrysalis within which it evolves into a beautiful creature with wings. The human being undergoes an equally dramatic transformation, unfolding the path to liberation from within the depths of the soul and emerging after great struggle as an expression of divinity in the world. Alexis Racken describes the spiritual experience of this liminal in-between space of becoming. Nobody ever talks about this part. You know, the part where you're no longer a caterpillar and not yet a butterfly. You don't know who you are and you don't know where you are going. All you know is that every fiber of your being is calling for transformation, for disruption. This is the dying of who you once were. This is your rebirth. How have you experienced transformation and new life? How have you experienced the presence of this loving, healing God in your life? How have you experienced Easter joy? I believe Easter happens over and over every time we choose life over death. Dying to self is the journey of discovering and becoming our true selves, diversely beautiful and whole, as we write a new chapter of life and joy. It is the life cycle of following Jesus. Barbara Brown Taylor says it like this: "Like every believer I know, my search for real life has led me through at least 3 distinct seasons of faith. Not once or twice, but over and over again. Jesus called them finding life, losing life, and finding life again, with the paradoxical promise that finders will be losers, while those who lose their lives for His sake will wind up finding them again." Taylor goes on to say, "You do not have to die in order to discover the truth of this teaching. You only need to lose track of who you are or who you thought you were supposed to be, so that you end up lying flat on the dirt floor basement of your heart. Do this," Jesus says, "and you will live." Easter calls us to die to self, become our true selves, and rise to new life in the fullness of authentic being. It is the ongoing journey of becoming who God created us to be, not someone else, rather exactly who you are, from the heart and soul, from the inside out. I met Nancy through common friends as we attended a number of events over the course of a couple years. Then one summer, attending an event in the mountains, I ended up spending the better part of 2 days at her family picnic table, engrossed in deep conversation for hours while eating Oreos like there was no tomorrow. It was glorious, authentic sharing, soul-filling and meaningful. That fall, Nancy reached out. She needed to talk. We set a time, and a few days later I made the 4-hour drive to meet her in her office while she was on break. She warmly greeted me, quietly closed the door behind me, offered me a chair, then walked behind the desk and sank into hers. She pulled the tissue box closer and poured out her story. She had tried everything she could to make it work, but the faith of her childhood was crumbling in all directions, with disconnects and woundedness creating great chasms of separation. She recalled things I'd shared about Community of Christ. She couldn't make any promises. She just needed a safe space to hold her while she tried to heal and find her way. Could I please help her somehow? It feels like something is dying. Could we maybe start a group in her town? That night, we met at a restaurant with 9 other people feeling similar things. There was a lot of talking, sharing from the heart, and listening from the heart. We identified some next steps and more people who could help along the way. Nancy was already experiencing lying flat on the dirt floor basement of her heart. Soon the shedding process of self-discovery became a comforting and sometimes frightening chrysalis space of becoming. She was in that place where you don't know who you are and you don't know where you are going. All you know is that every fiber of your being is calling for transformation, for disruption, the dying of who you once were. And the hope of what is yet to be, the rising to new life, rebirth, metamorphosis. Nancy is no stranger to loss and suffering. She ultimately allowed it to make her better, not bitter. She chooses to live deeply and fully. She is committed to helping others on similar journeys through multiple avenues of connection in the context of her professional and personal life. She is a wholehearted follower of Jesus, the Peaceful One. And for her, faith becomes love in action working for justice. Nancy understands the selfless nature of love as Christ loved. Like all Easter people, Nancy is a lifelong seeker, endeavoring to fully know and draw close to God. And the conversation with 9 others over supper that first night? Well, that led to an emerging congregation. Nancy, now an elder in Community of Christ, is their pastor. So it goes. The soul-longing search for real life leads us through distinct seasons of faith, metamorphosis, not once or twice, but over and over again. Easter proclaims the joy of finding life, losing life, and finding life again. The joy of authentic life, open to the ongoing process of becoming and sharing the good news of how love prevails in all the broken places of our world, willing to roll the stone of injustice away. Easter proclaims a loving God who yearns to draw the world close in an ever-widening circle of transforming love, bringing healing, wholeness, and hope. Mary, a woman, was the first to see the risen Christ. It was she who proclaimed to all who would listen, "I have seen the Lord."